What happens when one of the most beloved morning show hosts comes face to face with a guest who refuses to play by the rules? In just 31 seconds, a single comment would turn a friendly interview into the most explosive talk show moment of the year. Kelly Ripa sat in her signature chair, smiling warmly at the cameras as the studio audience settled into their seats. The energy in the room was electric. Today's guest was supposed to be a ratings goldmine. Prince Harry, the royal who had stepped away from palace life, was making the rounds to promote his latest project. But nobody in that studio could have predicted what was about to unfold. The interview started like any other. Kelly welcomed him with her trademark charm, the kind that had made her a household name for decades. The audience clapped. The cameras rolled. Everything seemed perfect. "Welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you here," Kelly said, her voice bright and genuine. Harry nodded, but there was something off about his demeanor. He sat back in his chair with an air of impatience, as if he had somewhere better to be. Kelly welcomed him with her trademark charm, the kind that had made her a household name for decades. The audience clapped. The cameras rolled. Everything seemed perfect. She had spent the morning reviewing her notes, making sure every question was thoughtful and relevant. Her team had worked overtime to prepare the segment, coordinating with Harry's people to make sure he would be comfortable. But from the moment he walked out onto the stage, something felt off. His handshake was limp. His smile was forced. He sat down with a heavy sigh, and as if the whole thing was already a burden. "Welcome, welcome. We're so excited to have you here," Kelly said, her voice bright and genuine. "How are you doing today?" Harry barely looked at her. "Fine," he said curtly. Kelly's smile didn't waver, though she felt a small prickle of concern. She had dealt with shy guests before, nervous guests, even hostile guests. But there was something different about Harry's energy. It wasn't nervousness, it was disdain. "Well, we're thrilled to have you. I know you've been incredibly busy lately with all your projects," Kelly continued, trying to warm him up. Harry nodded, offering nothing more. Kelly glanced down at her notes, then back up at him. She could feel the audience shifting in their seats. They had been so excited for this interview, and now the energy was already deflating. "So let's dive right in," Kelly said, keeping her tone upbeat. "You've been doing some amazing work with your foundation, particularly around mental health. Can you talk about what inspired you to make that such a central focus?" It was a perfect opening question, broad enough to let him take it in any direction he wanted, but specific enough to show she had done her research. Harry leaned back in his chair, his body language closed off. "Yeah, we do a lot of charity work. It's important," he said, his voice monotone. Kelly waited for him to elaborate. Guests usually jumped at the chance to talk about their passion projects. But Harry just sat there, looking at her expectantly, as if he had already given a complete answer. "Absolutely," Kelly said, filling the awkward silence. "And I think what's particularly powerful about your approach is how personal it is. You've been very open about your own struggles. Was that a difficult decision, to be so vulnerable publicly?" Harry shrugged. "Not really. People are struggling. Someone has to help them." His tone was condescending, as if the question itself was stupid. The audience was silent now. This wasn't the warm, engaging conversation they had been promised. This was painful to watch. Kelly felt her professional instincts kicking in. She had salvaged difficult interviews before. She could do this. "Well, I think it's incredibly brave," she said warmly, "and I'm sure it's made a real difference for people who feel like they're alone in their struggles." Harry looked at her with barely concealed irritation. "Is there a question in there? Nor are you just going to keep complimenting me?" Kelly's smile froze on her face. Her co-host shifted uncomfortably beside her. What was happening right now? I was just acknowledging the impact of your work," Kelly said, her voice still friendly, but with a slight edge now. "But let's talk about your new documentary series. What can viewers expect when they tune in? Harry sighed audibly, like even this question was too much to bear. It's a documentary about important issues. I don't know what else you want me to say. Kelly blinked. She had interviewed thousands of people over her career. Actors who wanted to promote their movies always had stories to tell. Authors who wanted to sell books always had insights to share. Activists who wanted to spread a message always jumped at the chance to explain their cause. But Harry seemed actively opposed to engaging with any of her questions. Well, maybe you could talk about what viewers will see, what stories you're telling, what you hope people take away from it, Kelly suggested, her patience wearing thin. Harry looked at her like she was asking him to explain basic arithmetic. People will see real stories about real issues. That's the whole point. The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras whirring. Kelly's co-host decided to jump in, trying to rescue the segment. I think what Kelly's asking is, what makes this documentary different from others out there on similar topics? What's your unique perspective? Harry turned to look at the co-host as if just noticing he was there. My unique perspective is that I've lived it. I've been through it. Unlike most people who make documentaries from the outside looking in, there was an uncomfortable implication in his words, as if he was suggesting that Kelly and her co-host couldn't possibly understand real struggle. Kelly took a deep breath. She was a professional. She could handle this. That definitely brings an authenticity that's valuable, she said carefully. And speaking of your personal experience, you've talked before about the challenges of growing up in the public eye. How do you balance that with wanting your own children to have more privacy? That's when things took a turn. You know, Kelly, I'm not here to talk about my personal life, Harry said, his voice sharp. I thought this was supposed to be about the work I'm doing, not some tabloid gossip session. The audience gasped. Kelly's co-host, who had been sitting quietly beside her, straightened up in his seat. This was crossing a line. But Kelly remained composed. Her years of experience kicked in. She kept her voice steady, professional. Of course, I completely understand. I was just asking because you've spoken publicly about fatherhood before, and I thought our audience would love to hear more about that side of things. But we can absolutely focus on the documentary. Harry rolled his eyes. Actually rolled his eyes on live television. Right, because that's what people really care about, he muttered. Kelly blinked. The cameras caught everything. Every eye roll, every dismissive gesture, every condescending word. She tried a different approach. She brought up a specific project he had championed, something she had clearly researched thoroughly. She referenced facts, true figures, impact. She was giving him every opportunity to shine, to talk about something meaningful. But Harry cut her off mid-sentence. I'm sorry, but do you actually know what you're talking about? He said, leaning forward. Because it sounds like you're just reading from a card. The studio fell silent. This wasn't just rude. This was hostile. Kelly's smile was gone now. Her professional mask was slipping, and for good reason. She had prepared for this interview. She had done her homework, and now she was being insulted on her own show in front of her audience by a guest who seemed to have nothing but contempt for her. I assure you, I've done my research, Kelly said, her voice still controlled, but with an edge now. I have tremendous respect for the work you do, which is why I wanted to have this conversation. Harry scoffed. Respect? Is that what this is? Because it feels more like you're trying to trap me into saying something you can turn into a headline. Kelly's co-host jumped in, trying to defuse the situation. Hey, nobody's trying to trap anyone here. We're all friends, right? Let's just have a good conversation. But Harry wasn't interested in making friends. Are we friends? He asked, looking directly at Kelly. Because I don't know you. And frankly, I don't appreciate being brought on a show just so you can boost your ratings by using my name. The audience was stunned. Some people in the front row had their mouths hanging open. This was unprecedented. Talk show guests didn't talk to hosts like this, especially not to someone as beloved as Kelly Ripa. Kelly leaned back in her chair, her eyes never leaving Harry's face. She could feel the weight of every camera, every audience member, every person watching from home. This was her show, her house, and she had every right to defend it. "Listen," Kelly said, her voice measured but firm. "I understand that doing press can be exhausting. I understand that you have a message you want to get across. But this is a two-way street. When you come on a show like this, there's an understanding that we're going to have a conversation, an actual back and forth, not me lobbing questions at you while you act like I'm wasting your time." Harry's jaw tightened. He clearly wasn't used to being called out like this. "I don't think I'm acting like anything," he said defensively. "I'm just not going to sit here and answer questions that have nothing to do with why I'm here." Kelly shook her head slowly. "Every question I've asked you has been directly related to your work or things you've already spoken about publicly. I haven't ambushed you. I haven't asked anything inappropriate. I've been nothing but respectful." The audience murmured in agreement. They could see it. Everyone could see it. Harry looked out at the crowd as if noticing them for the first time. His expression hardened. "Of course they're on your side," he said, gesturing dismissively toward the audience. "This is your show. These are your people. They'll support you no matter what." Kelly's co-host jumped in again, his voice tense. "Actually, I think they're on Kelly's side because she's been incredibly patient and professional. And you've been, well, the opposite of that." Harry turned his attention to the co-host now, his eyes flashing. "I'm sorry. Who are you exactly? I wasn't aware I was being interviewed by two people." The co-host didn't back down. "I'm someone who's sitting here watching a guest treat my colleague with zero respect, and I'm not going to stay quiet about it." Harry laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Unbelievable. Absolutely unbelievable." Kelly stood up now, her patience finally exhausted. "You know what? I've been doing this for over 20 years, she said, her voice rising slightly. "I've interviewed presidents, actors, activists, people from all walks of life, and every single one of them understood that this is a conversation, not an interrogation. I've given you every opportunity to talk about your work, to share your message, and you've done nothing but insult me." Harry stood up too, facing her across the coffee table that separated them. "Insult you? I'm just being honest. Maybe you're not used to that." The audience gasped. Several people shook their heads in disbelief. Kelly crossed her arms, her posture radiating controlled anger. "There's a difference between being honest and being disrespectful. And right now, you're being disrespectful. Not just to me, but to every single person who works on this show. The producers who booked you, the researchers who prepared questions, the crew members who set up this segment. You're acting like we're all beneath you." Harry's face was turning red now. "That's not what I'm doing at all. You're twisting my words." "I'm not twisting anything," Kelly shot back. "Your words are right there, on camera, for everyone to hear. You've been condescending from the moment you sat down. You've sighed. You've rolled your eyes. You've cut me off mid-sentence. And now you're trying to make this about me not being able to handle honesty? Please." Harry grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair, his movements sharp and angry. "You know what your problem is?" he said, pointing at Kelly. "You think because you've been on television for a long time, that means everyone has to treat you like you're special. But you're just another talk show host asking the same boring questions everyone else asks." The studio went deadly quiet. Even the crew members who had been moving around behind the cameras froze in place. Kelly's expression didn't change. She didn't yell. She didn't lose her composure. Instead, her voice became calmer. She more controlled. "If you think my questions are boring, that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But you're not entitled to come into my studio and insult me and everyone I work with. That's not how this works." Harry scoffed. "Right, because you're in charge. This is your kingdom, and we all have to bow down. No, Kelly said firmly, because this is a professional environment, and there are basic standards of decency that everyone is expected to follow. I don't care if you're a prince or a plumber. You treat people with respect. Harry shook his head, a bitter smile on his face. This is exactly why I left the institution. Everyone's so obsessed with respect and protocol and playing by the rules. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending. Kelly's eyes narrowed. Then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all? Because the whole point of coming on a show like this is to connect with people, to share your message in a way that resonates. And you can't do that if you're treating the host like an enemy. Maybe you are the enemy, Harry muttered, loud enough for the microphones to pick up. The audience erupted in gasps and shocked whispers. Kelly took a step forward. Excuse me? Harry met her gaze, defiant. You heard me. The media, talk shows, all of it. You act like you're just having friendly conversations, but really you're just trying to get people to say something you can use against them later. Kelly's co-host stood up now, too, his voice sharp. That's completely out of line. But Kelly held up a hand, signaling him to let her handle it. Let me be very clear about something, Kelly said, her voice steady and cold. I have never, not once in my entire career, tried to trap a guest or twist their words. I have never aired something out of context to make someone look bad. That's not what we do here. And the fact that you would accuse me of that on my own show, in front of my audience, shows exactly what kind of person you are. Harry's expression faltered for just a moment, as if he realized he had gone too far. But he recovered quickly, his defensiveness returning. I'm the kind of person who doesn't play games, he said. I say what I think. No, Kelly corrected him. You're the kind of person who uses honesty as an excuse to be cruel. There's a big difference. The two of them stood there, locked in a silent standoff. The cameras captured every second of it. Finally, Harry broke the silence. I don't have to listen to this. Kelly shrugged. You're right. You don't. The door's right there. Harry stared at her, as if expecting her to back down, to apologize, to beg him to stay. But Kelly didn't move. She just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. Fine, Harry said, ripping off his microphone with such force that the wire snapped. This was a waste of my time anyway. But before he could storm off, Kelly stood up too. She wasn't going to let him have the last word. Not on her show. Not after he had disrespected her, her team, and her audience. I've been doing this for over 20 years, Kelly said, her voice cutting through the tension. I've interviewed presidents, actors, activists, people from all walks of life. And every single one of them understood that this is a conversation, not an interrogation. I've given you every opportunity to talk about your work, to share your message, and you've done nothing but insult me. Harry turned back to face her, his expression incredulous. Insult you? I'm just being honest. Maybe you're not used to that. The audience gasped again. This was getting worse by the second. Kelly shook her head. No, you're being rude. There's a difference. And I don't care who you are or what title you have. Nobody gets to come on my show and treat me like I'm beneath them. Harry's face reddened. You think you're so important, don't you? Just because you smile at a camera every morning? Kelly didn't flinch. I think I'm someone who shows up every day, does my job with integrity, and treats people with respect. And I expect the same in return. The tension in the studio was suffocating. Crew members were frozen in place. The audience didn't know whether to applaud or stay silent. This was live television at its most raw. Harry grabbed his jacket from the back of his chair. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to sit here and be lectured by a talk show host. Kelly crossed her arms. Then don't. You're welcome to leave. But when you do, remember that you're the one who turned this into a disaster, not me. Harry paused, as if he wanted to say something else, something even more cutting. But he seemed to think better of it. Instead, he turned and started walking off the set. But Kelly wasn't finished. "And just so we're clear," she called after him, her voice steady and strong, "you were invited here as a guest. That means you show respect for the people who work hard to put this show together every single day. We don't ambush people. We don't play games. We have honest conversations. If you can't handle that, then maybe you shouldn't be doing interviews at all." Harry stopped in his tracks. For a moment, it looked like he might turn around and come back. The entire studio held its breath, but he didn't. He kept walking, disappearing backstage as the cameras captured every step. Kelly turned back to the audience, her composure returning. She straightened her shoulders, smoothed her hair, and addressed the crowd. "Well," she said, her voice lighter now, almost amused, "that was unexpected." The audience erupted, not in gasps this time, but in applause. Thunderous, supportive applause. They were on Kelly's side, and they wanted her to know it. Kelly smiled, a genuine smile this time. "You know what? We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I will have someone who actually wants to be here." The applause grew louder. People were standing now, giving Kelly a standing ovation. She had handled an impossible situation with grace, with strength, and with dignity. As the show cut to commercial, Kelly sat back down in her chair. Her co-host leaned over. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. Kelly nodded. "I'm fine, but he's never coming back on this show. Ever." Backstage, the mood was chaotic. Producers were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do next. Harry's team was in damage control mode, but there was only so much they could spin. The footage was already out there. Millions of people had just witnessed what happened. Kelly remained on set, taking a moment to collect herself. She had been in this business long enough to know that sometimes interviews went sideways. But this was different. This wasn't a case of mismatched personalities or awkward chemistry. This was a guest who had come in with an attitude, who had treated her and her show with contempt from the very beginning. The commercial break ended. Kelly was back on camera, her smile firmly in place. She introduced her next guest, a young author who was thrilled to be there. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Where Harry had been dismissive and rude, this guest was warm and engaging. Where Harry had made everything about himself, this guest was humble and grateful for the opportunity. Kelly fell into an easy rhythm. She asked thoughtful questions. She listened. She laughed. This was what her show was supposed to be. This was why people tuned in every morning. But everyone watching knew that the real story was what had happened just minutes before. Social media was already exploding. Clips of the confrontation were being shared, dissected, analyzed. People couldn't believe what they had just seen. The interview with the young author wrapped up smoothly. Kelly thanked her guest, thanked the audience, and signed off with her usual warmth. The cameras stopped rolling. The studio audience filed out, buzzing with excitement. They had just witnessed television history. Kelly stood up and stretched. Her team immediately surrounded her, checking in, making sure she was all right. She assured them she was fine, maybe even better than fine. She had stood up for herself, for her show, for her values. And she had done it without losing her cool or stooping to his level. Where one of the producers approached her with a concerned look. "His people are asking if we can maybe edit some of that out before it airs in other markets," the producer said carefully. Kelly raised an eyebrow. "Absolutely not. What happened, happened. We're not covering for him." The producer nodded, not surprised by the answer. As Kelly walked back to her dressing room, she reflected on the interview. She had given Harry every chance to be a good guest. She had prepared thoughtful questions. She had been respectful, even when he wasn't. And when he crossed the line, she had stood her ground. That's what people would remember. Not just that a guest had been rude, but that Kelly Ripa had refused to be pushed around. She had shown strength without being aggressive. She had been firm without being mean. She had been everything a host should be in an impossible situation. In her dressing room, Kelly sat down and checked her phone. Messages were pouring in from friends, colleagues, even other celebrities. Everyone was supporting her. Everyone was appalled by how Harry had behaved. She put her phone down and looked at herself in the mirror. She looked tired, but also satisfied. She had done the right thing. She had protected her show, her team, and her own dignity. Outside, the story was already taking on a life of its own. News outlets were picking it up. Entertainment websites were writing breathless recaps. Everyone wanted to know what had caused the blow-up, what had been said behind the scenes, what would happen next. But Kelly wasn't worried about any of that. Or she had been in this business long enough to know that the truth would speak for itself. People had seen what happened. They had watched Harry disrespect her over and over again. They had seen her try to salvage the interview, and they had seen her finally draw a line. As the day went on, the support for Kelly only grew stronger. Viewers called in to the show's hotline to express their outrage at how she had been treated. Social media was flooded with messages praising her for standing up for herself. Even people who had never watched her show before were now declaring themselves fans. Kelly handled it all with her characteristic grace. She didn't gloat. She didn't trash Harry in the press. She simply moved on, focusing on her next show, her next guests, her next opportunity to do what she did best. But the message was clear. Kelly Ripa was not someone you could push around. She was a professional who demanded respect, and she wasn't afraid to enforce that boundary when someone crossed it. The incident became a defining moment, not just for her show, but for how guests should behave in interview settings. It was a reminder that talk shows are built on mutual respect, on a willingness to engage in good faith, on understanding that both the host and the guest have a role to play. Harry had forgotten that, or maybe he had never understood it in the first place. He had walked into that studio thinking he was above it all, that his status meant he didn't have to follow the same rules as everyone else. Kelly had proven him wrong, and she had done it in front of millions of witnesses. And the standing ovation from the studio audience said it all. They hadn't just been applauding because the awkward moment was over. They had been applauding because they had watched someone they admired stand up for herself with dignity and strength. That's the kind of moment that defines a career. Not the thousands of successful interviews, but the one time when everything went wrong and the host handled it perfectly anyway. Kelly Ripa had faced down an entitled guest who thought he could walk all over her. And she had showed him, and everyone watching, exactly who was in charge.